Greetings and welcome to episode 38 of the Sustaining the Herd podcast, brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Andrew Wadle, and joined in the studio as usual with my co-host, Brock Vitek.
Hey there, Andrew.
Morning, Brock. And we're also joined in our studio with our special guest today, Dr. Jessica Sperber, Assistant Professor and Feedlot Extension Specialist at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Welcome, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And in a moment, we'll give Dr. Sperber a chance to introduce herself. But before we get into our episode, we'll just welcome our previous listeners, our existing listeners, back to us. We really appreciate you joining us and the great feedback that you give us episode to episode. That kind of keeps us going and keeps helping us to put out good content there that people find useful. To our new listeners, we want to thank you for joining us, and just to give you a very high level view of what sustaining the herd is and what sustainability means to Agri-Services. Well, first of all, sustainability means protecting the air and the water, and that is, how does agriculture in general, coexist with society and the environment? We all want clean air. We all want clear, clean water, whether we're on the production side or whether we're people in town. And the second part of sustainability is efficiency, and Dr. Sperber is really going to dig into this, I suspect, and that is resource efficiency, doing more with less, and how is agriculture always getting better. And then the last part about sustainability, and it's surely not the last, but we'll say it's the third part of sustainability, is business sustainability. We have to have strong agricultural businesses so that our businesses continue to exist and continue to do all the great things that farms do and supporting industries do to produce feed, fuel, fiber, etc. So with that, again, Dr. Sperber, welcome to Sustaining the Herd, and please tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I've been in Nebraska for just over 6 years now, 3 years on faculty, and I also did my PhD at the University of Nebraska with Dr. Galen Erickson. And so I'm actually from north of the border, and my family farms in central Alberta. We have a cow-calf and grain operation up there. So I grew up in Alberta, grew up in the 4-H beef industry, obviously loved market steers, loved everything the beef industry had to offer. I did my undergrad in Alberta in biology, and then I actually did my master's in meat science and beef carcass quality at West Texas A&M under the supervision of Dr. Ty Lawrence. So during that time, I stood in a lot of packing plants collecting data, really enjoyed my experiences there, and it really drove me to want to understand production full circle. So grew up in cow-calf, had some meat science training, and then obviously topped that off with a PhD in feedlot nutrition. So brought it full circle. After I finished my PhD, I went back to Canada for just right around a year and worked for a feed company as a technical consultant for their sales team. And then the position opened up at the university, and I've now been on faculty, as I mentioned, for just over 3 years as a feedlot nutritionist and assistant professor extension specialist. So it's been excellent. We got a lot going on at the university that we'll get into a little bit later in the episode, and honored to be here with you guys and chat a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry today.
Well, I know Brock's got lots of questions, and I don't mean to be an episode hog right off the bat, but I will say that
Andrew.
when I see assistant professor and feedlot extension specialist, everything that I see in that title is applied, and so we're really excited to hear and eager to hear about the things that you're doing actually in the field. And I say this because I am my educational pedigree was from a professor and extension engineer, and so I kind of know the circles that your kind travels in, and it's really good for our industry. So Brock, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica, and thanks, Andrew. Just wanted to mention briefly, you a couple of the stops you've had along the way in your professional journey. Reminds me of a couple guests we've had on here. first of all, you said you did your master's at West Texas A&M University and your PhD at UNL. Well, we previously had Anna Kobza on many episodes ago, who's one of your current colleagues. I know she's working on her PhD in ruminant nutrition at UNL, so sustaining the herd
I'm on
connection.
Anna's committee. I'm on her
Oh,
PhD.
that's awesome.
Okay,
That's great.
yeah.
And as some people might know, her husband, Kane Wellnitz, works with us on the team here at SETI as well, so a lot of connections. And we also had Dr. Kevin Pond, the dean of the Paul Engler College of Ag and Natural Sciences down at WT, as a guest a while back. So the world just keeps getting smaller for all of us here, and excited to have you join that group of distinguished individuals as one of our guests. So to kick things off with our discussion today, I'd like to just jump into, let's talk about where fed cattle are today. And I know you have some insights on this, so I'd like to have you talk about that with us.
So I think it's no surprise to anybody that we are getting cattle to heavier outweights, heavier than we ever have before. The trends, I mean, we've been increasing cattle size and weight since the 1950s, right? You think back to like the mid 1950s when 1,000-pound Hereford steer was our market animal, right? And he was a yield grade 5, had a lot of additional fat on him. We raised him a little bit bigger into the 70s, and then in like 1987, I want to say, Excel came out with their carcass specs for both heifers and steers, and their heifer carcass spec at that time was 1,090-pound heifer live weight. We have 1,090-pound hot carcass weights now, right? Our discount is 1,100 pounds for a hot carcass weight. So we've really have moved the ball a lot in terms of how heavy we're getting cattle these days. Just as some averages for 2024. Into 2025, we saw hot carcass weights right around 840 for heifers and 940 for steers. If you look at some of the Nebraska closeout data on the National Weekly Cattle and Beef Summary right now, we're still sitting right in that nice 950 to 960 area for market steers. And that's hot carcass weights, obviously, right? And so in Nebraska, we're dressing a 64. So when you do the math on that with a 64% dress, we get a 1,500 to 1,550 pound market steer, right? And those are significantly larger than we've ever seen before. If you look at some trend lines from 2000 to 2022, on average, we were putting on around 6 pounds of carcass weight each year for steers and around 4.5 pounds each year for heifers. In 2023 and on, we've quadrupled that, right? There was some closeouts last summer, year over year, that were up 51 pounds on hot carcass weight. So we have really been putting the coals to these cattle, seeing what our genetic potential and nutritional and management abilities are with these cattle, and producing some of the highest quality grading, highest yielding cattle that we've ever seen before. Obviously, with those high quality grades or improved marbling scores, we also get a lot of yield grade 4s and 5s, right? Which is something that we need to talk about as an industry in terms of discounts and in terms of wasted energy in that animal, right? The fat that we're trimming off of the carcass is in reality wasted calories that we fed to that animal, right? We don't need as much fat on those carcasses as we currently have today. From the 2022 National Beef Quality Audit, we were sitting quite pretty in terms of overall prime and choice combined. We were over 76% prime and choice combined in the 2022 National Beef Quality Audit. We are currently sitting in Nebraska at 88% prime and choice combined today. So, we have really increased quality grading. That's largely as a factor of our drive for longer days on feed. They're highly correlated, increased days on feed, increased marbling. But then it's also due to our obviously genetic selection and genetic push, and then our good friends at Certified Angus Beef. Obviously the Angus breed does bring with it a lot of marbling, and the premium for that has really changed, especially for us in Nebraska, the way that we feed and breed and market cattle. So, as an industry right now, absolutely zero challenge with prime and choice. The Elanco benchmark data for 2025 was around 86% choice and prime combined for heifers and 77% choice and prime combined for steers as a whole nation. So we are really hitting those quality grades, but again, with that comes the challenge of yield grade 4s and 5s, right? You can't put on one fat without the other fat. And so as we increase back fat on those animals, right now we're seeing yield grade 4s and 5s from the National Beef Quality or Elanco benchmark data sitting around 22% for heifers and around 20% for steers. And so it's no shock we're making them fatter. We are putting more additional weight on the animal. I mean, at the end of the feeding period, the majority of that weight is in the form of fat, to be honest. We are getting a little bit additional muscle, but if you're selling in the beef, that's dress for your animal, right? Your dressing percent goes up from 63 to maybe 64.5, teetering on the edge of 65 if you're in Nebraska. And that's a very positive outcome for you as a feeder, because you're getting paid for that dressed carcass, right? And so as an industry today, there are no signals for our feeders to not feed longer, right? The cost of buying a calf to replace the fat animal that they have in the yard is extremely high, the highest it's ever been. Our cow-calf producers are pretty happy about that, right? My dad north of the border is amping up to sell his crop of calves this next week here, and he's pretty excited. But for all of the feeders that have to buy those calves into the yards, there's a pretty tight break even on those cattle, right? And we got to really price them into the yards. We've been pretty fortunate over the last 3 years, but this year and the way that the futures have jumped around over this last week really, puts a little bit more risk into our system, and managing for that risk becomes even more critical. So I just, with the marbling, we all love the taste fat, right? We call that marbling, the taste fat. The waste fat comes along with it. And in today's marketplace right now, a prime steer, if you put it on the grid, is worth like anywhere from $13 to $14.50, depending on what grid you're in, and maybe you personally have a different negotiated grid, right? But that's the industry national average, around $13.50 a hundredweight for a prime. Obviously, no discount at a choice, and then once we move all the way up to, or all the way down to a select, we're seeing a $22 discount. But the select cattle are very, very few in our industry today, right? I mean, over 80% prime and choice combined. If you look on this last week's National Weekly Cattle and Beef Summary, a prime premium was sitting anywhere from $18 to $21. So we are still suggesting to our feeders that we want that high quality graded beef, which in turn just keeps them feeding them for longer, right? Especially if you're a custom feeder. Yardage is everything for you in that scenario, and you want to continue to feed longer.
And Jessica, just take a step back. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of people that we call the people in town who listen in, and they learn a lot. From people like you. Could you just give them a synopsis on yield grading and things like that, just so they have an idea of really what that means?
Oh, 100%. So let's start with quality grading. So quality grading is that nice feathered fat that you see within your nice ribeye, right? If you're choosing on the meat counter, you're choosing the one with more fat spread throughout that ribeye, and then that would indicate whether you are going to be a prime, a choice, or a select, right, across the scale. And then with yield grade, this is an equation. So we have hot carcass weight, ribeye area, fat thickness, and kidney, pelvic, and heart fat all included in the yield grade equation. And so that is largely driven by fat thickness and by hot carcass weight. And so you'll see extremely light muscled animals that have a lot of additional fat on them be super high yield grades, 5s and above. Usually our yield grade system is from a 1 to 5 is what we reported on, but you can calculate yield grades up into the 7, 8, 9s if they're really light muscled animals that have a lot of additional fat on them. The opposite side of that, a yield grade 1 and 2, are super highly muscled and cuttable animals. We say that they have greater cuttability because more muscle, boneless, closely trimmed retail meat yield is coming off of those yield grade 1s and 2 animals versus the yield grade 4s and 5s that lighter muscled in nature and have more fat cover on them. So that's where we see in the spectrum. You get a premium for a yield grade 1 and 2 if you're selling your cattle on the grid. For cattle sold on the grid, you get a discount for yield grade 4s and 5s. Those discounts, again, are variable depending on where you're at. Right now, the yield grade 4 and 5 discount sits around $12.50 to about $19 per hundredweight, right? So you would multiply that $19 by a 1,000-pound carcass, so you'd multiply it by 10. So $190 discount on a 1,000-pound carcass.
Gotcha. So how does there's a lot of talk about beef on dairy. How has beef on dairy kind of moved things within that yield grade bracket? And because I mean, being part dairy, they're different animals, right?
I knew this would come up from you, Andrew.
And let me jump in briefly, and kind of like Andrew just had you do for the yield grade and quality grade carcass weight for the people in town or those who may not work directly in livestock. Could you give a high level overview of what beef on dairy even is,
Yes,
along
of
with
course.
talking about how that's impacted this data that we're looking at?
So since about 2017, 2018, beef on dairy has really taken over a lot of our marketplace. On average, they're still sitting around 5 million in our cattle on feed herd. And so they are what that is a dam that is of dairy genetics, a dam that is of dairy genetics with a beef sire onto that dam. And so really the goal is for that dairy to be able to keep and sex semen their ideal replacement females on the dairy side by using dairy on dairy genetics, right, for them to retain within their own herd. And then the cattle that normally would have gone to the feed yard as straight bred Holsteins, now we're putting genetics onto those cattle that are predominantly making them 50% beef, right? And the top breed for that would be Angus, but we do see Limousin, Simmental, Charolais genetics going onto those cattle as well. The top would be Angus though. So the biggest benefit of the Angus, right, is that when you cross an Angus onto a Holstein or onto a Jersey, the majority of that calf crop comes out with a black hide or a majority black hair coat. And so they do qualify for certified Angus beef or beef premiums that have those, if they meet all of the other 10 specifications. So there is an advantage to them, but the one thing that we always knew about straight bred Holsteins is that they marbled extremely well. Right, we had no challenges with quality grading in straight bred Holsteins, and our beef on dairy are showing that for us today as well. What I love is that the National Weekly Cattle and Beef Summary actually reports dairy bred steers and heifers now. So if they know the background on those cattle, they are reporting it. So probably a pretty small population, but on a national basis, those beef on dairy type cattle are grading an 85% choice and better. So they really do grade quite well. And for many of our feeders here in Nebraska that are selling on a grid with those beef on dairies, they have a very, they're very assured that their beef on dairy cattle are going to hit those premiums for quality grade because they do marble extremely well, especially when crossed with a British breed like an Angus breed, known for their marbling, right? So they are an opportunity for us and a benefit, and they marble really well. As we know, there are some yards in Nebraska that are really, really capitalizing on the beef on dairy type genetics and type cattle. And it's just, I mean, from an entire system, I think it's a really positive story for our beef industry because we found a way to upgrade those calves that really were a byproduct for the dairy system 10 years ago, 7 to 10 years ago, and now they are high value, high quality beef that we, are enjoying feeding.
Yeah. Well, speaking from the dairy side, it's been transformative because, like you said, within past 10, 15 years ago, bull calves, you had to find a place to go with them. It wasn't an easy thing to do. Whereas now, with sex semen, the game has completely changed. So with, there's this talk currently about a shortage of feeder cattle. I would have thought that with beef on dairy, it totally would have changed the equation the other way, where there would have been an absolute just a flood of feeder cattle, beef on dairy to augment the cow-calf operations.
Mm-hmm. So what happens with that? And right, some individuals would think that listening to this podcast. So what we've seen in years previous is that whenever we hit a really bad drought where we've culled a lot of our cow herd and the cow herd drops, like what we saw in 2013 to 2015, in those scenarios, we are augmenting, like you said, Andrew, we are adding in different types of animals to fill those gaps in the feed yards. That's when we had the large introduction of straight bred Holsteins into the feed yards, right? You could go to I mean, I was in my master's at that time. You went to any yard, well, any of the 5 yards that I was roaming around in Kansas, they had straight bred Holsteins on feed, right? It was very, very common to see straight breds on feed. But then once we got our traditional native beef cow herd back up to the, over 30 million head, which is our comfort zone, once we got that cow herd back up there, rebuilt from the previous drought, then we saw, okay, now how can we upgrade these straight bred Holsteins and make them more of an ideal animal, shorten their days on feed, improve their muscle to bone ratio, make them more in terms of a beef market animal that we want in the feedlot business, and not something that's just a byproduct of the dairy industry. And so, again, now that we've had a over 10% reduction in our cow herd since 2020, sorry, we've seen this cow herd reduction, extreme tightening of cattle on feed, and the beef on dairy has helped us not drop so low, right? You look at overall beef production from the National Weekly Cattle and Beef Summary. What was super cool is, even though we knew that beef cow numbers were dropping over 10% since 2020, weekly beef production from 2024 matched the 5-year average prior to that, almost identical, even though our cow herd was reducing, which meant we had less calves, which we know that the beef on dairy plus technologies, right? Experior really came into the marketplace. We'll get into that a little bit later. But all these technologies, we were really doing best management practices, making sure that we were able to get every animal to finish the way that we needed them to. And then in addition, we were feeding for longer. So all of those things combined, plus our nice beef on dairy calf crop, really allowed us to stay at these weekly beef production values from 5-year average. However, you look at it today and into these summer months for the 2025 averages, we are now seeing weekly beef production reduce. And so if anybody wants to look at the market report that I keep on referring to, just literally Google National Weekly Cattle and Beef Summary, and you can see some really nice graphs on there. But we are now seeing the extreme tightening. And that's, when I look at the OSU, Dr. Daryl Peel, I'm sure you guys have both heard of Daryl, excellent ag economist. But when you look at his economist report from this week, actually, we only have 11 million head as of September 1 for feedlot cattle on feed, and that's down 1.1% year over year. So we are reducing, we're seeing this tightening. Even with the beef on dairy, they're not able to overcome the loss in those, because in reality, those beef on dairy are replacing those straight bred Holsteins that were in our herd previous. But
I see.
But we don't have them on feed for as long, so there's some give and take in that regard there. But yeah, it's the feedlot inventories now are super interesting. And again, quoting Daryl, they're currently the lowest since January of 2019.
Right.
So
I think if I hear what you're saying as far as the beef on dairy, it's really just backfilling what was lost, or the previous decline since 2020.
Yeah, we just essentially changed. Instead of feeding straight bred Holsteins, we started feeding beef on dairy in place of those animals in the feedlot.
Gotcha.
Interesting. Yeah, and just to zoom out a bit for a moment, I think everything we've talked about here so far speaks to one of the pillars of sustainability Andrew laid out in his introduction, and that is resource efficiency, doing more with less. You talk about putting more pounds of beef on these animals in the same or shorter amount of time than previously, with less animals overall, and really encouraging producers to look at improving yield grade. It just all speaks to doing more with less. I think there's a really neat sustainability story that is being written as we speak in the beef cattle industry and cattle feeding.
Yeah, I mean, even you look at it as if cattle are heavier, that's fewer trucks on the road. That's less diesel being burned.
Absolutely.
to supply the same amount of meat to the packer.
Yeah, the implications
those
go on and
trucks
on.
are still limited on weight that can go on them, so
right.
There is some nuances in there. But yeah,
Sure.
There's, it was an incredible sustainability story when you look at how much more we've done with one beef cow's progeny over the last 5 years than ever before, right? We've put all this additional weight on. We have made them more efficient. We've introduced technologies. We've done best management practices. We've really honed in on our genetics. It's a pretty cool time in the industry right now to see what will happen next. But it's also a very scary time for many of our feeders on what will happen next, right? And you always hear, anywhere from cow-calf all the way through the feedlot, when is it going to give out? Like, when is the floor going to drop, and when are we going to stop seeing these prices? And I mean, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to comment on that. But in Daryl Peel's latest market report, he does say that we'll expect to see this decline of the feedlot or of the feeder calf population into 2027. So will prices follow that? I guess the biggest question is, will the consumer still be willing to pay for beef that is priced this way for years to come? But I mean, after COVID, our consumers love consuming beef, right? They learned how to cook it better at home. I don't have TikTok, but I think a lot of people credit TikTok for teaching people how to cook at home better and teaching people how to utilize beef better. And I think it's a pretty cool story that our consumers are this in love with our product because they know that it's safe, nutritious, and sustainable, right? And they're learning all of these things about our product. And I think it's just an awesome, awesome story showing us that consumers love the beef that we supply here in the U.S.
Yeah. So to get to these heavier cattle weights, I know that a lot of your research involves how do we get there, and how. So just give us some insights in terms of how are we getting there, and I realize we're getting there faster than ever before, and just go into that if you could.
Yeah. What's changing at the feed yard, right?
What's changing at the feed yard?
Yeah, and I think it's not just what changes at the feed yard, right? It's what changes when the cow-calf or the seed stock is making their breeding decisions, right? And I think that EPDs and many things in that regard have helped us select animals. Even now genetic testing of some heifer populations in cow herds can recommend to you which bull is going to be the best option from a bull sale catalog. It's very, very cool where we've gone. And I think that there's a whole bunch of technologies available at the fingertips of our producers. But that can also seem overwhelming at times, right? Like in the feedlot business, we are pretty cut and dry. We know, if somebody's using a technology growth enhancing technologies, implants, beta agonists, majority of the industry will follow suit because you can see it on the rail. On the cow-calf side, it does become a little bit overwhelming for some of them. And I realize that a lot of technologies, and not growth enhancing technologies, but actual wearable technologies, genetic testing, all of those things can seem overwhelming. But in terms of how we've gotten to where we are and with carcass weights or our final out weights today in the feedlot, obviously genetics has had a large play in that. There's no doubt about that. This days on feed increasing is a huge one. And so we've increased days on feed just over the last year by an additional 15 days, meaning that feedlot animal that we bring in as whatever weight it is going to stay in the feed yard 15 days longer than it did the year prior. So we're putting 15 more days of feed into that animal, 15 days of more care into that animal. But then also on the backside of that, that's 15 additional days that animal could encounter some type of digestive or respiratory or illness challenge and could potentially die in the yard, right? And we're seeing more late-term death loss. And I think, any veterinarian or epidemiologist that you talk to, the longer days on feed that you leave an animal in the yard, the more opportunity for morbidity or mortality, right? And so that is one slight challenge that we are dealing with today, but an interesting one for many of our vets and epidemiologists to be researching. And so, now overall days on feed, and this is an Elanco benchmark number from 2025, we're sitting at right around 209 days for heifers and 215 days on feed for steers. And that's an average across both calf feds and yearlings. So lighter weights coming into the yard and heavier yearlings coming into the yard. So days on feed, massive one, no doubt about that. Obviously, balanced nutrition, dietary energy content, all of those things, right? But we've been pretty locked in on that, and nutritional management over the last 40 years. So there's 40 years plus. So there's really not quite a change in that regard. But We also last winter had probably the easiest winter ever in Nebraska, right? You'll talk to any feed yard, they loved last winter because it was a super easy winter, which then in terms for Nebraska cattle feeding, we put even more weight on these cattle because they did not have the cold stress winter challenges that they would normally have, and they came out even heavier than ever before. But in addition, obviously, growth enhancing technologies such as implants, which we've used since the 1950s, right? They are a huge opportunity for our cattle feeders. For any of our listeners who maybe are not so in tune with just how many additional pounds an implant can offer, in the feedlot phase of production, giving 1 or 2 implants within that phase, depending on what implant strategy you're using, can offer 85 to 105 pounds of hot carcass weight. And that is like for $12, $12 to $16 for those implants. So it's a really incredible return on investment for our feeders. And then even at the cow-calf level, right, we talk about putting on a few additional pounds to sell right now. One suckling calf implant, which costs $2 in the US or less, and in Canada, very, very cost effective, on average offers you 20 to 22 pounds of live body weight gain. 22 pounds of live body weight gain at $4.50 to $5.50 a pound is incredible. So what I say to all the cow-calf guys right now is don't sleep on suckling calf implants because they are more bang for your buck than ever before, but also they cost $2.
Right.
So you return that by even getting half a pound of gain on those calves. So in addition, outside of implants, many of our feeders here in Nebraska and in the greater US and into Canada are using a product called Experior. And Experior is a beta agonist fed at the end of the feeding period. The average national average right now is maybe into the 50 days on feed at the end of the feeding period, but last year's 2024 average was right around 42 days. So they were feeding it for 42 days. Very cost effective, on average increases hot carcass weight by about 3%. So you feed this product that is very cost effective, you return 3% hot carcass weight on your animals. And it's an incredible story because it also improves feed efficiency. So intake, cattle dry matter intake does not change, has not been shown to change from all the research that's been done on Experior, on this beta agonist, does not impact intake. So their intake is stable, they gain more, in turn, they convert better, right? Their feed efficiency conversion is better, or feed conversion efficiency is better. So it's also another positive story in terms of sustainability in cattle feeding.
And can you just talk about, the whole hormone thing? It's always a hot button thing with our friends, the people in town. Can you just talk about the safety and just what people need to know about hormones and other feed additives as it relates to just food safety?
Yep. So implants and beta agonists are both FDA regulated and approved, right? So we get an FDA label, and that comes with years and a lot of money by those manufacturers to do really, really well done research studies with non-biased researchers. And so the individuals who do those studies are blinded to the treatments, and we make sure that there are no residues and no negative implications within the muscle tissue that's produced or the beef that is produced on those carcasses. So that it's really, really well done in that regard. And, the number one concern with implants is that they believe that there's greater estrogenic activity in the beef from implanted cattle than in the beef from non-implanted cattle. And actually, those only differ by about 1 nanogram. And a nanogram is a billionth of a gram. So that's like one blade of grass in a football field for easier terms. And that's how much they differ between an implanted animal and a non-implanted animal. So it's really not concerning for us. And, it's not a challenge for us at all in terms of estrogenic activity, very, very low estrogenic activity. And it's about 150,000 times the estrogen activity in the 3-ounce bun that you're going to pair with your hamburger rather than the beef that's in the burger. So yeah, it's a excellent sustainability story for us in terms of improving feed efficiency, doing more with less. And it's very, very safe for consumers. There are absolutely no concerns with the efficacy and safety of implants and beta agonists in beef production.
So it sounds like eat the burger, skip the bun, right? I mean,
Well, I mean, I think we all want to boost intake, but yes, for lack of a better term, yes.
Andrew, you're not sponsored by a keto diet
No, I'm
organization or
not.
something, are you? Okay, good, just checking.
I'm good with bun and
Carnivore
burger.
diet.
Yeah.
Just had to check.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Jessica, I really appreciate that we've gotten into the data and the nuts and bolts of how sustainability really looks today, and helping the people in town understand that. And I'd like to pivot a bit and ask, what does your day-to-day look like? I know you're an assistant professor, you do research, you teach, but you also have an extension aspect or appointment to your role, working with feedlot producers here in Nebraska and beyond. What's that look like day to day for you? And I'm sure it all relates.
Yep. So obviously my week to week changes every week. I do a lot of travel. I'm very, very fortunate to get to speak at a lot of major conferences in many different states. We were actually adding this up the other day. I think I've spoken in 26 states so far, which is really cool, and an awesome opportunity to spread the good word about beef and beef production. And so, speaking at conferences, doing research here at the university, but then also on-farm research. So I'm really fortunate to have some great feedlot partners out there that have done some on-farm research with me, and it's really exciting to be able to train graduate students out in the field right on commercial feedlot production, in addition to our facility here at the university, which is an excellent facility, and we'll get into that in a second. So outside of research, I'm always trying to package the research results into a way that a producer and a consumer can better understand the point of our research, why we did it, and how they can apply it. And so obviously the consumer can't always apply it, but I think it's very, very critical for consumers to be able to understand where their food comes from and how it's created. And so, always looking for outlets and opportunities to do that. So just a quick plug, but I do put out a lot of information on our UNL Feedlot Facebook and Instagram page. So if anybody wants to go and follow those, try and put out as much information about the feedlot sector and the research that we're doing here at the university on those pages. And so outside of that, I'm also a co-host on a podcast as well, just like you, Andrew, and Brock. And
just go ahead and plug it
yeah,
away.
Give me a pitch for that, please.
Sure. So it's called the Future of Beef Show. We started up in January is when we put out our first episode, and it's essentially what we're trying to accomplish there is just like what you two are trying to, enhance and get the word out about beef and beef production and efficiency of beef production. And so, we pretty much interview the movers and the shakers of the beef industry. Whatever hot topics we see going on in the industry, we like to talk about those. And so it's called the Future of Beef Show. And so happy for any of these listeners to also jump on that and give it a listen as well.
And I believe that there's a guest that we both have in common. Would that be right?
Yeah, our good friend John Schrader.
Shout out to our good friend John. John, I'm sure you'll be listening to this episode, so we have to give you a shout out and say hello. I also wanted to ask, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're involved with the Timmerman Feed Yard Management internship program, is that right? Could you talk a little about that?
Yeah, thank you, Brock. Awesome. So
one of my good friends went through that a few years ago, so I think it's a really neat program.
Well, and not only that, but that's our third part of sustainability, and that is developing people to come work in these businesses. And so you're right up the alley of just another part of sustainability, Jessica.
Mm-hmm. Well, the biggest thing that we get on every single survey from feeders is labor, right? Labor is a huge challenge. So how do we as an institution, the university, try and help our feeders with that labor challenge? And we think that it's by getting students and the future leaders of our industry super excited about feedlot production. And so the Timmerman Feedlot Internship Program is ran through the University of Nebraska, large sponsorship from the Timmerman Feed Yard family. So thank you to them. And so what we do is we bring in recently graduated undergraduate students. So recently graduated from their undergrad bachelor's program. They'll be on site with us here at the university for about a month, working out at our university feedlot, but then also taking some classwork with myself, Dr. McDonald, and Dr. Erickson. So the three of us with some additional guest speakers, obviously on economics, etc., and markets. And then they'll go out and do from July until the beginning of December, they will go out into a commercial feedlot that is part of our program. Commercial feedlots all across Nebraska, but into Kansas, South Dakota. We had one previous intern go up into the Pacific Northwest because she had interest in that area of the world. So they go and they do a 5 to 6 month internship with that feed yard, and they are essentially they learn all of the moving pieces of the feed yard. So they'll spend some time in the mill, they'll spend some time riding the pens, they'll spend some time in the office. Every single part of the feedlot, we want that student to learn during the internship. They come back in December, teach us what they learned for 2 weeks, and then they're on their way. And the retention rate is excellent into the feedlot sector. We're very happy and excited always to interact with any of our feedlot interns from previous years. And actually right now we have 2 of them or 3 of them in graduate school with us. So it's a pretty cool opportunity to get some hands-on real world commercial feedlot experience. So always happy to have any new and interested individuals come forward for that program. Yeah. So, thanks you guys giving me plugs for all the things.
No, that's excellent. But and I think it's a perfect segue into, so we've got students and sending them to commercial yards and gaining all the knowledge and the benefits of doing that. So let's just get closer to home and talk about what are you doing closer to home at the UNL facilities in terms of research and student engagement, et cetera.
So last October, we opened up the Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center. So we got our first group of cattle in there. And shout out Sechi for the great build on that.
Oh, hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So the Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center added on actually 4 different housing systems for us. So in addition to an individual animal intake barn that's named after the late Terry Kloffenstein, who had a lot of impact in Nebraska and Nebraska feed yards. And so that facility is 9 60-head open dirt lot pens, 9 roller compacted concrete pens, 9 deep pit slatted floor barn pens underneath a monoslope roof, and then 9 deep pit slatted floor underneath a gable roof. And so it's quite the facility. It's really exciting. It added on over 2,200 animals to our graduate students' current bill of getting research done. So in addition to that Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center, we have around 130 smaller research pens, 10 to 20 head research pens in the North and South Feedlot facility. All of this is located out by Mead, Nebraska. And so there's a lot going on out there always. At any given time, our feed crew is mixing up 20 plus different diets based on whatever type of research we're up to. So it's a lot of moving pieces, but shout out to all of the graduate students and full-time employees and undergrads that help out at the feedlot, because it could not run without all of their help. But what we're up to now is just finishing up the first year's project through that feeding facility, and that data should be coming out in the 2026 Nebraska Beef Report, which will be released in the next couple of months here. So keep a watch out for that. And that beef report tells all of the research that we've done in beef at the university over the last year or a couple of years. So it's a yearly publication that we're very proud of. And so right now we're wrapping up the study in the KFIC, or Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center, which was comparing a few different diets across those housing systems, and then also doing a nutrient mass balance. So we talk a lot about in the manure, right? And so Andrew, I realize that's some of your expertise, and so looking at manure quality across those different housing systems as well, which is, we're very, very excited to share that data in the near future. And so there's always a lot going on. I actually have the funding for the next round of cattle going into the Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center. And so I'm excited for my graduate student to get to work on that project. And yeah, it's a lot going on, but if you're interested in what the University of Nebraska is up to in terms of research, just look up the 2026 Nebraska Beef Report, and that will highlight everything we've done.
Yeah, we'll certainly be on the
Excellent.
lookout for that. I'm excited to dig in once that publication is released. And I have to also mention, this would have been a couple of years ago now, but I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center. And now emeritus, but at the time, Vice Chancellor for the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources, Dr. Mike Boehm, made the comment during the groundbreaking ceremony that without innovation, that place would be KFC. So, Andrew, Jessica, our work we're doing in the beef industry with innovation is critical to make sure the beef industry isn't KFC, because that's chicken, not beef. So
Yeah,
don't
that's
forget
right.
that one.
That's
Had
right.
to drop that humor in there for us.
Yeah, that was a
Focus
good
on
one.
it. Keep focused on that innovation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Jessica, this has really been a lot of fun today. We really appreciate you sharing your time and talent and energy and expertise with us to share about what's going on in the beef industry with fed cattle today, and how the industry continues to move forward in terms of innovation and in sustainability. So just thanks again for saying yes to being our guest.
Yes, of course. Thank you guys for having me.
And tell us.
And-
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. I think I know where you're going.
I was just going to say, please, if you don't mind, let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you, and go ahead and plug your podcast again.
Yeah, so you can message me on Instagram or Facebook via UNL Feedlot, because I'm the ones that run those social media pages. Also, just, send me an email, jsperber2@unl.edu. Very, very simple email address. And listen in on the Future of Beef show, which is, the podcast that I co-host. So.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you all heard it here. Listen to the future of beef, and feel free to reach out to Dr. Sperber if you'd like to visit more or have any questions for her. And with that, I hope that all of you listeners, both new and returning, have enjoyed the episode today. It's been a lot of fun to talk about some of the nuts and bolts of what we're seeing in the beef cattle industry today, and at the end of the day, to talk about how it all relates to all of us as consumers of beef and the products of agriculture. We look forward to being back with you again in a couple of weeks. And until next time, thanks for joining the herd today.